Hello, hello. This is Dr. Randy with Restore the Real. Welcome to our podcast today. I have a really great guest today. I met her at ECO, which is Exponential Clinical Outcomes put on by Cellcore, and first listened to her as a speaker, and then have gotten to know her over the past few years at different events, and just a wonderful human being. Nichole Kuechle, and I said your name right, correct?
Keekly, but you know what? At this point,
Nichole Kuechhle.
no,
Sorry, they
it's
can
no,
they
no,
can
no,
edit that. All
no.
right.
You're good. That's fine.
So we wanted to welcome Nichole Kuechle. She is a wife, a mama, a wonderful human being, a master of nutrition response testing, muscle tester, holistic health practitioner, and more. So welcome to the show.
Thank you. So fun to be here. I was telling my husband about you yesterday, and I'm like, no, you don't understand. He's that crazy man who runs through the mountains for 36 hours at a time. That's who's interviewing me.
That may be a little bit of an over exaggeration, but it's all
No,
good, right?
like, what is he doing?
I love that. That just like fills me so much. Um, but tell us a little bit for those. I mean, I think there's some people that know you, and obviously some people that know us, some people that don't. But can you give us a little bit of history on your past? What have you done, and how did you get into this space? Because I always find it fascinating. Nobody goes into holistic health, functional health
Right.
without a challenge. So, would you share, like, again, your history, your past, and then why are you here? Why are you doing what you do now?
All of that has changed, right? Like all of the why has continued to evolve over the years. And I think like most practitioners, it's the long and winding road that brought me here. Not only seeing like we know that healing is not linear. For me, that started very early. I was 16 when my mom was diagnosed with cancer. She was 36. I'm the oldest of four kids. It was so super, we always talk about like, what are the impactful things, right? It was a
Right.
super, super impactful um, time in my life. And I got to see firsthand. So let's back up for a second. When I was 10, I knew, like, it was my first intuitive ping. I remembered it was just like bing, and it was suddenly there. Like, you're gonna have your babies at home someday. And I remember like looking around, like
What?
where did that come from? And now, I call those things intuitive pings, like those divinely planted, seeds. And I remember thinking, like, I haven't seen a TV show. Like, they didn't talk about stuff like this. We were more, modern medicine, if you will. If something was wrong, we went to the doctor, got an antibiotic. By the time I was 16, I knew how to call and make an appointment, bring my siblings into the pediatrician, go to the pharmacy, pick up their medication, go home, administer. Like that was like already, that was indoctrinated, right?
You're already
And
like an at-home nurse.
I know, for real. And then get this, I was like a home health aide. No joke. I was a trained home health aide at 16. And so driving around, to like environments I like probably shouldn't even have been in at 16. But it was what I saw. And like, you have to get that I wasn't in any way, like, there was nobody around me that was holistic, if you will. Like, nobody was talking
Right.
natural health methodology around me at all. I wasn't reading books. I had no idea that there was like another way that you could truly take on your health, like the self mastery, right? Of like health and well-being. And watching my mom like, get her diagnosis, driving her to radiation treatments. I mean, I thought my mom was going to die for 2 years. That was the honest to goodness truth. And even my mom said, I don't know, a couple of years ago, she was like, I was in remission within like 4 to 6 months. That is not
Not what
my
you remember.
fearful
Yeah.
16 to 18-year-old memory, of like, I was 16 to 18 at that time. And within a handful of months of my mom getting sick, I developed an ulcer and then was consequently, pulled off the gymnastics team. I had been a gymnast for 9 years. I loved it, but it was doubled over. I mean, there were mornings that I couldn't even stand up straight because of the stomach pain I was having. And every time, I tell this story, Randy, I'm like, ooh, if I would have known then what I know now, right?
Right.
Always. But I could see even at the time, like this slippery slope, like back in my days of, almost 2 full decades as a birth, postpartum doula, cranial sacral therapist, teaching childbirth education, like that that background didn't really even prepare me for some of the things that I am seeing now, right? So it's interesting. Like at the age of 10, so the whole like you're going to have babies at home. The other thing was like you're going to be a doctor. So I had all this in the background. I watched my mom get sick, go through like what's happening with my body, watching what occurred like a slippery slope of intervention. That's what we used to call it in the birth world, right? You do one thing and then it's like really slippery and fast. The
Right.
ongoing like need for more intervention, i.e., to be managed by others, right? Um, and I watched that and I remember like it was yesterday being in one of my mom's appointments. I think this was down at the Mayo Clinic. We're in Minnesota. That's close, relatively close by for us. And I remember this oncologist saying to my mom, she had to go to so many, like every 3 months, every 6 months, like that, inside of being in remission. And I remember him saying, like, you're fully in remission. Like, this was an amazing thing to hear, and these are some of the things that you'll need to be watching out for. So I was 16 and change at that point in time. And he riddled off this list of diseases as if he were giving her a list of symptoms to watch out for, right? Heart
Okay.
attacks, breast cancer, like, and I remember just like my antenna, like me,
Right.
something isn't right here. This doesn't make sense to me. And some of that was in the sense of like some of your heart tissue is radiated by way of like what we couldn't cover and what we couldn't get at, inside of getting at this big like baseball sized mass behind your chest. And I'm listening to all of these things going just like, is there another conversation? Right? I didn't know I could speak. I didn't know to ask questions, but I'll never forget some of those key, they weren't even conversations, right? Like we were just being told something by a white coat and that's what was to be expected. And so like my mom said, it was only a handful of months. For me, it was this long, arduous 2-year fear factory.
That's
It seemed
heavy.
like we
I mean,
were,
that's
what's
so
that?
heavy for a 16-year-old to
Totally.
hear all that and not feel like maybe you had a voice to ask a question or to,
Right.
hey, wait, can you explain a little bit more of what do you mean by this?
Right.
And then how that informs what actions are and what we're internalizing and how maybe we react with our parents and siblings, and that's heavy.
Heavy. I remember
Yeah.
taking so I was the oldest, my baby brother, the youngest of the four of us, was 4. Like I have looked at each of my 3 kids at 4 and just like the impact, right? Like again,
Right.
very present to the impact. I remember taking him into the hospital library and checking out books that would explain what cancer was to somebody his age. Like cancer were like the bad, unhappy, sad bubbles in the body. Like I just remember this,
Right.
and then non-cancer cells, like your cells that are helpful in your body, are happy and full of joy, and yeah, impactful to to say the least. And when I think about what happened with my health, we all have these triggers, right? The things that sort of light up the unhappy cells in our body. Let's just call them that.
Yeah.
And for me, that was, an ulcer, like I said, within about 6 months. And then on top of that, once they put me on Zantac, of course, and after that was supposed to handle everything, I remember a decrease in stomach aches, but then the stomach ache shifted. It just moved. It moved location, and it got worse. And so finally, after pressing and pressing and pressing, and after all of our going to the gynecologist and then going to the urologist and then go like many of these appointments by myself at that time, 17, 18 years old, for them to tell me you have endometriosis. And just like in my heart of hearts, I didn't really think that was the case. Now, if they would have said something like schistosomiasis, I don't know if I could have, bought it at the time, but I'm
Right.
like
Yeah.
100% clear what was going on now. And some of the procedures and the things that they were doing to rule things out and to get further questions were horrifying and terrifying. Being alone and just told to like lie down, sit still, don't talk. We can't give you like pain support for this, where they're driving some kind of camera wire up through my ureters to look at my kidneys. Like that freaking hurt, and it was
Right.
scary. And for them to be like, you have this, you have this, you have this. And for me to be saying like, I actually think it's my appendix, and for nobody to listen. So pushing that button for, they called it subacute chronic appendicitis, right? And I will say the day we got them to remove it was also like the day that we agreed to that they could check me out while they were in there for endometriosis. And that was going to be like their avenue in. To this
Right.
day, that makes zero sense to me. Like now, hindsight, I'm like, I don't even like, you're not even looking at the state. Like, what are you doing? But that was like the hitch, right, to getting one
Right.
of these things looked at. So I will say I woke up from that appendectomy with no more pain. That pain point was absolutely gone, and shifted, right? So then I had what I've described for 20 some years as a brick in my belly, sitting, right between my pubic bone and my umbilicus, right? Just right
Right.
there. Happens to be, like a bladder hanging out there, a little bit of colon. Like, it's, yeah. So, all of that started me on a path to just looking like, why don't I feel like I'm being heard? And why don't I feel like I'm being supported? And, really kind of what else is out there for me? And, at that age, it's like we always say, like our formative years are the first 7 years. But my gosh, when we're in high school, when your best friend's a vegan, you become a vegan, right? When
Right.
you're
There's
right,
so
like
much going on, so
so
much
much,
influence.
so much influence. Like I was on the gymnastics team. Can we talk about eating disorders for a second? Like I was
Right.
surrounded by it, and thank God that was never, like a path that drew me in. But I had a friend who was, like she was a vegetarian. So of course I went that route, right? I don't know that helped, but you start on this path of self-discovery and that like self-individualizing, like taking yourself away from family, right? You're all crazy,
Right.
and
Yep.
starting to do things differently. So I started to see my own chiropractor. Thankfully, that was like a gift my parents had given us. I'd seen a chiropractor since I was 12. So I'm so grateful for that experience. But I started seeing my own chiropractors. And then at 20, I realized, I think that I'm not cut out for this whole university education stitch that I've been in for a couple of years, like pre-med biology. I'm out. This is not what I thought it was going to look like. Nutrition 101 was not. I think I was looking for a little more W or like Weston A. Price at the time, and I didn't know it existed, right? But I just
Right.
remember sitting in this huge lecture hall for Nutrition 101 going like, I don't think I actually care about calories. Like, this is not what I'm here for. So I just started to what I needed was a life break. That's what I needed.
Hmm.
Right. And I did give myself permission to do that. So I got out of school. I drove across the country, lived with one of my best friends in Mammoth Lakes, California for a little while, begged for a job sweeping the floor of a convenience store at a resort for $6 an hour, lived off my credit card. I couldn't afford
Yep.
to be there and do that. I couldn't afford to be in school. I couldn't afford anything at the time. So, but I needed to ground out. That's what I'm seeing. Right. And of course we get called to nature to do that. I was always very much called to that.
You
As a
know,
child.
something you said, and I think that people can overlook this is through that time, 16, 17, 18, and as you said, not feeling seen, not
Right.
feeling heard,
Yeah.
and then let alone all the procedures that were done,
Yeah.
the trauma that triggers, and that is trauma, right?
Mm-hmm.
People talk about PTSD coming from, whatever experiences, but that accumulation, even
Yeah.
one, and not being heard, not being seen, I think I think women have that, um, not because you're a woman, but because society is like, oh, they're just overreacting, which is such a disservice because, as you said, in my heart, I kind of felt it was my appendix, but who's listening to me? And and there's so much intuition and strength and power there. And then when you are told just kind of essentially, shut up, this is what we're doing, man, the pain that can cause, and then the repercussion that potentially has for life. And for some people, resentment, bitterness. I just won't ask questions. I won't speak up. Other people can take it just the opposite way and be like, no, I have to be the master of my own health because no one else is. And it's so just fascinating how our younger years play such a role in how we participate in society and in relationships because of things that happened then. And sometimes, 30s, 40s, you're like, oh man, I understand. I get it. But 20s, 30s, it's like, I don't, why am I responding this way? What's happening? It's so challenging. And to go back to those beginning years, even teens, and recognize, wow, that had a huge impact on me and how I am.
Well, I think too, there's something magical, right, that happens once you hit your 40s. It's like you've got the space and the wisdom to start unraveling and unpacking the first half of your life, right? Or the
Yeah, for real.
it's powerful. And what I started to see is that in that, 16 to say age 20, it was, those little surgeries and those little procedures. They weren't like big things, but what they were, it was insult to injury. It was triggering of what was already there from my early childhood in all of those female areas, right? Like
Right.
in the place that I did not feel like I had any sovereignty. I did not feel like I owned my own body, like I could have a say in my own body. And so I didn't, of course, know that at the time. I just knew that I jumped farther and farther out of my own skin, right?
Yeah.
Like, get me
Yep.
out of here. And that was a familiar place to be. So I could do that, like getting me back in my body. That took decades, right?
For real.
And then
Yeah.
it's just a conscious effort to stay grounded in that space. And so one of the things so my mom, she's still living, but she had a lot of health issues, just these, compounded health issues. And so calling 911 was normal in my household for, oh, we think she's had a stroke, or oh, we think these things have happened. And it was just ingrained by no one other than the imagery, right? Like that is not going to be my path. That is scary. That is lonely. That is isolating. That is, full of a lack of understanding, right? I could so clearly see all that. And I was like, I'm not signing up for that. So by the time I was 18, like I said, I started to see my own chiropractor when I was 20. I jumped into at the time, it was the most comprehensive bodywork program the Twin Cities had here. It was like an 18-month program. And I was like, 18 months. Yep, I can do that. Like I couldn't see finishing my 4-year degree at the time. Like 2 years was 18 months. It was like, I can do that. And so that's what I started to do, Randy, was like, that program's 9 months. Great. I'll do that. That program's 6 months. Okay. I'll do that. And I just started stacking them on. And that is what gave me power. I was like, I get to follow my interest, right? I get to immediately serve those that are like right in front of me and like showing up in what felt like droves at the time for support. And I got to feel like I was in control of something, which was really phenomenal. But it wasn't until my 40s that I started to see, with, a couple of health crashes I've had in the last 2 years, that like, oh, I wasn't present to the timeline that I had. Gosh, you think about the timelines you have to draw out in middle school, World War I, World War, like, right? And then just these big, you draw a big pyramid over here, right? Like you draw the White House over here. And when I start looking back at what those timelines are, I realized that I had a story called If I Can Make It Till I'm 36, which was when my mom was diagnosed with cancer. And then I had another story called If I Can Make It, which like just make it is just survival. Hamster wheel, just jump on and
Right.
spend the rest of your life just swirling, right? If I can make it to 45, which was when my mom had a heart attack, right? And I didn't catch this until I was probably like 36, 37, that I was like, holy buckets, I am expending a lot of energy here working on what I don't want.
Right.
Right. Versus like, we see this all the time with our patients and client base, like that versus working on like what we do want and say like what we do have control over and around. So, I'm 47 as of this past fall. And, like once I made it to 45, there was no I'm here. This is amazing.
Right.
It was more like, what was I so afraid of? Why did I live out the majority of the last 2.5 decades from a place of fear, and scarcity?
Right.
Holy crap. Like that sets a tone, and then
It
that
does.
ripple effect, right? Like in every area of my life, like it's crazy to be 47 and to be like, I believe I've stood in a place of self-responsibility for many, many years. Like I feel like I was 12 when I started to have those conversations with myself. But I'm also like, I can have they're intuitive pings, right? Because they land with like, oh, I can actually, that isn't mine. Okay, well now that I've realized that, I can let that be, and I can move forward, right? So I've spent so much of my 40s like kind of cutting those cords, those invisible but like
Yeah.
dirty and rotting, filthy cords that had me attached to things I couldn't control, to energies that weren't mine, to see on the other side of that is that place of sovereignty and is that place of freedom and like speaking the truth, right? Like sharing what that reality was like for me. That's and not I heard something recently that I so loved, and it was someone, telling the story about some of the, traumas and things that she's experienced. And this was so important. She said, I need you to understand that I'm telling this story from a place of um, thriving. Excuse me, not from a place of victim and still being there and still being in like the survival show. And I
Right.
so loved that she created that discernment right there on the spot, because then her story is being told from a place of empowerment and a
Right.
place of like, here I am and here is what I've learned. And when we learn so deeply about ourselves, like we can give so much more. It's like relentless, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
The giving, yeah, that we can do. I'm just so grateful for I'm in a place where I can say I'm grateful for the experiences I've had. Like they're not, how do you say that? They're not of me, like they didn't consume me, not that they're of me, and that I can see how I can give from what I've learned.
Right. It's like it's our experiences give us, they have the ability, not
Right.
always, they have the ability to give us this like superpower,
Mm-hmm.
right? That we can take it. And I love this aspect of it, that we can choose what we want to focus on and what we don't.
Mm-hmm.
And the power and the strength that gives us. I know I spent years, kind of, you talked about, if I could just get to this age, not necessarily that, but this expectation of, if I can just have this event happen, then things will be better.
Oh,
And if I can just
100%.
have this happen, and
Mm-hmm.
it's like, you're actually doing all the things that you don't want. It's like you're just trying to avoid
Mm-hmm.
everything you don't want. But
Mm-hmm.
by doing that, you're getting the things you don't want
I was
because of this
like
place
killing
of
myself,
fear, right? Yeah,
killing
you're
myself.
literally mentally, physically, spiritually. And it's like, wait a minute, what am I doing? And it can be by a person, an event,
Mm-hmm.
something. And it just is a trigger that's like, wait, there's a different way to live. And I remember the first time I heard this from my coach. He said, you are not your thoughts, and you're also not your brain. He's like, you have a brain and you have
So that's
thoughts.
a good little side note.
Right. But you're not those things.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, well then who am I?
Mm-hmm.
He's like, that's the problem. You don't even know who you are.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, well, of course I do. And he's like, okay, you can think that and you can go on thinking that. But if you actually look within, what have you been doing for the past several years of your life? Are you
Mm-hmm.
running from something, or are you living and embracing what God's blessed you with? And it was like, no, I'm not doing that. I'm
Right.
definitely doing the former, which is out of fear.
Mm-hmm.
And it took me time to process that, right? As you said, you spent years like not having that strength, that power. Hey, this is me. I am in control of my body, not somebody else. I don't have to give that power away. Our thoughts are the same way. And I
Mm-hmm.
was trying to be something that I thought I had to be. And it was like, no, just be you. But
Mm-hmm.
man, that internal work, it can take decades. It doesn't have to,
Right.
but it can, depending on how
Yeah.
hard we make it,
Yeah. Yeah.
and how open we can be to just allowing things to move through us, and not like, I got to hold on to every single thing that comes because I own it. It's like, no, I don't want
Mm-hmm.
to own those things. I
Mm-hmm.
just want to let those go.
I would catch myself saying things like, "Oh, I'm an empath. Like I can, pick up and feel what everybody else is feeling in the room." But like the more I declared that as a superpower, the more I was hosing myself, right? Because it's like then I was just this like open vortex. So I fought that for a lot of years. Like, why is it that I seem to like I attract the crazies? Like, what's that about? And so I had to get really right with myself about, like what are my energetic boundaries? What am I
Right.
allowed to just observe, and I can observe, notice it, and like let it be over there and not right like encompass it as my own. And something you were saying about not being you're not your thoughts and you're not your brain. So as a form of self-expression at a very young age, I mean, it was, 10, 12, like I had diaries, I had journals. That's where I could speak freely. And
Hmm.
that's where I wrote down about the recurrent nightmares that I was having as a kid. And that's where I was right, like in this scene, this is what happens. In this scene, that's what happens. And when I started to actually wake up to what had happened, like what that particular trauma or set of traumas was. I, I went to therapy. It's probably 12, 13 years old. And then, even then, though I loved that, I really did appreciate her. Like, she just was very grandmotheringly lovely, and I felt safe in that. But I honestly spent till I was probably 22, 23, telling the same story and drawing the same picture almost every week. And that was part of like the unpacking that started, or not even unpacking, but just the reality bite that I started to see between 18 and 20 was like, what am I don't feel like this moves the needle, and I feel like the needle should move. I don't know how or where, but
Right.
not from here, right? And so I stopped doing that, and that's when I sought out like the energy work, the light workers, right? Like I started getting on the table of, Reiki masters, and then I was in this body work program, right? I was just like, oh, it felt so good to be touched, to be held, to be supported, and then to be able to give that away also to other people. And so as I slowly started to, land back in my body, I was 20, like 6 when I had our first daughter. And 2 years later is when we got married. And I remember, sort of like writing up our guest list, doing all of those like exciting things, and
Right.
having this aha moment that there's a part of my story here that hasn't been told. And starting to tell that story. And I had a very unseen blog, like 7 family members maybe were following said blog at the time. I don't even think you can find it anymore. Um, and I started to share some of that story, and the flack I got, the ostracizing I got for what I was doing to our family. by sharing what had actually happened to me. Like, was talk about diminishing, right? Talk about
Right.
disempowering. And at that point, it did actually fuel the beat, like, bring it. I'm here to tell my story. Like, and I'm just
Yeah.
getting started, you know? And it's been now 20, little over 20 years that I've been, maybe at times more eloquently than others, able to share all, in some instances, in some crowds, some of that story and those triggers that then come on later in life, right? That are just this open wound from a past that was just unresolved. Like, it's that simple when I look back at it now, right? I remember, like, so when things come up, like, i.e., say, I don't even really say triggers so much anymore, but I'll just say like a new memory or like a new
Right.
thought about it. I can consciously say to myself, like, oh, I've now evolved to a place where that new me has to resolve it at a new level, right? There are new kind of inquiries to have, like, there are new questions to pose of myself. Sometimes I have to call my mom and go, like, okay, so I have this question, like, do you know the answer to this question? And I appreciate those conversations because they give me clarity, right? And then they allow me to just ground deeper, clear that up for myself, and move forward. But I think, like, societally, we hear, don't do that. That doesn't serve anyone. You don't need to talk about this. Why are we talking about this again? Right? Like, those are the
Right.
things that we hear out there from people. So that is just like that sovereignty and that being at peace with oneself. I mean, more power to you to sort it out, right? And to who knew that that would be part of a guiding light for what I would do, and who knew that it would also attract families and children and women who had been in similar scenarios. Like, that never occurred to me, right? As a what would show up in my career, and what causes autoimmune disease, what causes
Right.
chronic illness, what causes this degenerative process in the body. Well, you and I both know when you start tending to those emotional and energetic conversations, our symptom load starts to decrease,
Absolutely.
right? The pain
I,
starts to lessen.
yeah. I think it's really interesting. And I liked how you said this, like that a memory would happen. And now it's like this new me that is ready to maybe address this or
Mm-hmm.
to let it be. And it is like a renewal. Like, we have experiences, they renew us. We become a different person. Our
Mm.
friends and family
Yeah.
looks at us as, oh, you're just, like little Randy, kid and whatever. But we're not. And I find that sometimes, like, as you said, when you started to write your blog and how family reacted, it's not so much, it should be, I use the word should, this place of compassion. Oh my
Mm-hmm.
gosh, I had no idea that this was your experience, as opposed to, well, this means, does this lessen who I am? Does this lessen on the
Yeah.
other person that's reading? Is like, does this make me a bad person? And then we like attack. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
wait, can we just have compassion and grace and just accept this was your story.
Mm-hmm.
This was your interpretation of that. And it's okay, but how can we support? And I think it's challenging in the midst of everything, where, especially now where things are so polarized, it's so much easier to react than to go within and not blame or guilt, but be like, wow, I had no idea that was going on, and have some compassion so that then there's healing.
Mm-hmm.
But also so interesting in that same, where the new me, as you said, and then you're able to work through that. And then you start to attract these people that may have never had a voice
Right.
and that have never been listened to. And because of the experiences you had, it's like, wait, yeah, no wonder they're coming, because I am going to listen, and I've felt the pain, and I've been unheard and unseen. And now I'm a place where these women and kids can feel safe
Mm-hmm.
and they can share. And I think that's such a beautiful thing. So how then did that evolve? And I'm curious to know, like, as you started to see people, was it as you said, they just started showing up. But did there become like an intention of, hey, I am serving these people. I need to help or reach out or grow myself so that I can help more people?
That's a good question. If you consider that I was 20 years old when I completed my birth doula certification and was attending, um, the midwife who trained me as a doula connected me with my first three doula clients, right? Like my certifying experiences, right? Where we get the evals and whatnot. And the first labor I attended was 5 days long. I'm 20 years old. I was like a
Wow.
part-time nanny because that's the thing that actually paid my bills, right? While I was
Right.
just trying to explore and grow this other side of myself. And I remember, calling her as my mentor in tears, like, I'm on day 3, like, I need a nap. Like, I need to go, like, but I can't leave her. How does this go? And so like, she would come in and relieve me. And I started to see so much of myself in this, young, laboring woman in the, waves of, as you know, like, how many kids do you have? 3?
I have 5.
5. Okay. And so you've been
Yeah.
through labor, not you, but like you've supported the process,
Yep.
right? And labor has different phases, right? And different phases of like emotionally how we see ourselves and emotionally, and then physically how we express inside of moving this baby through that's rotating, through our bodies and through the birth canal. And I would see her go to these places of surrender. It was like so beautiful and warm and just like gushy and like, oh, it's just so like life-giving, right? And then I would see fear take over and her body would
Mm.
shut down physically, right? And we would go to the places that her husband and I like would struggle to get her back to that safety place, that surrender. And
Right.
I just remember going like, I see myself, I see myself, I see myself, I see myself, like in every phase of that. And I remember when my mentor came to relieve me, one of those long, long days, I was like, this is so hard and maybe I shouldn't be doing this, right? And she said, I picked her for you. Like, she has a similar background of experience as you, and this is going to heal part of who you are to prep you for motherhood. And I just remember it was like
Wow.
someone had just dropped a concrete block, like had tied my feet to the ground with cinder blocks. I was like,
Right.
poof, like back in my body. And I'll never forget that. I'll never forget those shaping, character shaping, who am I grounding, like personality grounding, right? Opportunities to watch myself grow as someone's evolving right in front of me, minute by minute by minute. So I continued, I worked pro bono with some teen moms. That was the thing. They weren't being heard. They weren't being supported. They were ostracized by their families. I didn't have the experience of a teen pregnancy myself, but like I could put myself in their shoes really easily. And I didn't advertise my background, but I magnetized, that's what I'll say, right? There was
Yeah.
like a magnetism to who ended up in front of me. And even when it wasn't in their intake form, it was like, I got you. Like, I can see this, right? You do enough research at that point too, right? You're like,
Yeah.
it's like a PhD, just in self-knowledge and in being able to like line people up and be like, right? Um, but it helps to understand how to support these women and their families inside of what they're going through, because I'll tell you what, like, in my experience, most of these women and children that I work with, these women didn't start waking up until their 40s, and I'm grateful for, I think I was waking up by 12. I didn't
Yeah.
know that.
Yeah.
um and and I woke up alone, if that makes sense. I didn't find that, you know tribe until maybe my early 20s, and then I still didn't have anybody doing things the way the way I was doing it, right? Like my
Right.
mother-in-law, I remember, we presented the like, okay, we're pregnant, we're having a home birth. This is what we're doing. This is very normal to me. Thankfully, my husband just really 100% supports. You might not understand, but he'll 100% support and back me in all of those decisions. And I remember my mother-in-law just going like, I 100% trust you, but girl, you've got balls. I remember thinking, I mean, I don't actually, but thank you, because it wasn't about like courage or bravery or like, I don't know, righteousness or something. I don't know, maybe that's not what she was saying. It was about safety. And I was like, well, this is obviously the safest option. This is why would I do it any other way? Right?
Right.
Like home, like safety, being grounded in my own
Yeah.
space, eliminating millions of risks that lie out there, potentially. Like, but
And
it
then
was
and then and then
also,
it's your choice.
yeah.
You're the one that's in control. You're kind of calling the shots, so to
Mhm.
speak, as opposed to being acted upon and not having any control, which is, what happened in your
Yeah,
late teens. And it's
sure,
like, no, I'm not going back to that. I'm
sure,
not doing that.
sure.
That's awesome. How
Yeah.
did that then, like, so how did these experiences, how did this lead you from being a doula, working with expectant mothers? How did you then transition? What was the transition to health, to holistic health?
Yeah.
Like what
Okay.
what
So,
what made that?
yeah. Well, one thing to know is I was taught how to muscle test when I was 20. So in this bodywork
Okay.
program I was in, we were taught your basic, lock, unlock. And I remember just like, okay, well, that's cool. I don't really think I have anything to apply it to outside of this sort of structural stuff I'm doing, and used it very little. I also, there was no like permission to do anything else with it, right? There was no thinking outside the box. And so I became my own little health nut, right? I mean, I did my pregnancies Weston A. Price style. Nobody else around me was doing that. I was shopping at the co-op, and we were living off of literal sticks and twigs from a money standpoint, and robbing Peter to pay Paul. But darn it, if I
Right.
wasn't going to shop at the co-op and buy our, milk and eggs and cream and whatever from a farmer, right? Like that's just how I did it. We were on like raw milk driving rotations, right? Because that's how we could get it where I lived. And so um I and this is the beautiful thing about what happened. So these women have babies, and the funny thing is they grow older. They grow into toddlers, they start going to school, and then I would get these text messages. This is back when, I had a BlackBerry. Remember those?
Right. Yep. Yep.
And your cell phone was this big. And it would be like, my husband was just diagnosed with gout. Like, what do I do? Or my baby, da 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 da. What do I do? And sometimes I just had an answer, but like it wasn't in my scope of practice. But I
Yeah.
was their trusted, I became family. I was their I was their go-to, and often like their first window into a more holistic realm. And so I had a literal Rolodex, the things that sat on the desk with the little business card
Oh
thing
yeah.
you could
Yeah.
spin. And that thing was fat because I recognized early on there's value in, if I don't know the answer, I'm going to tell them I don't know the answer, but I'm also going to tell them that I know somebody who does, because I always did. And
Yeah.
even if I didn't, I was like, I know one of these three
I'll
people are going
find
to get me there. I'm
somebody.
going to find
Someone.
someone, or I'm going to just do this. And that's just like, that added value for myself because I could learn along the way, and then I could make these warm connections, which I realized I was really good at doing and really, really loved. Like I really just love like making sure people are connected into the right crowd and that they, find their tribe. And so as I was fielding all of these calls, I remember thinking like, if I could be paid for every quick question that led to a 1 hour phone conversation, or let's have coffee, which was really let's pick your brain, and that was 90 minutes, and my kids were in daycare that I couldn't afford, and like just that,
Right.
right? Like, man, like I could have made some money doing that. And so it really just became that conversation of how can I, like, what is it that I need to know, or what like certificate do I need on the wall to provide me with that reciprocity of money in the bank for
Right.
my time, wisdom, and knowledge, right? Like I was
Yeah.
actually starting to think like I've got these multiple avenues of revenue, but they're not really adding up. They're not making a difference. and these people aren't getting better. And I was also like, I was doing first line therapy for like through Metagenics. I was working at a functional medicine clinic, but like nothing was actually paying the bills. And then I was frustrated because there was this block to how far I could take and support people.
Yeah.
And
A
at the
block,
same
a
time,
block mentally, or a block like when you say a
probably
block,
both.
what do you mean?
Actually, it was probably more of a mental block than anything, because it was the
Okay.
whole world that I had made up about what I don't have access to, which I
Yeah.
had access to all along. I just didn't like know where to tap in. But all this time, Randy, my babies were being muscle tested by chiropractors. And I was being muscle tested by a chiropractor in Chicago. Like I was getting distance testing like in my early 20s, like in my first pregnancy. And the guy nailed it every time. And like a week later, 3 or 4 supplements would show up. I would take them and like, bam, it would handle the
Yeah.
issue. And so I started thinking like, wait a second, if this whole like telling everybody to try going gluten-free and dairy-free works for the majority of people only for a certain percentage of the time, yes, it's better for everyone, but like there's something more. If I knew just something a little more specific about you, I could really guide your health coaching plan in a much more individualized way.
Yeah.
And so then I started thinking about muscle testing, and that just because of my experience here in the state of Minnesota, I was like, oh, I have to have a license. I have to be a nurse. I have to, so that's what caused me to go down that road. I think it was like 2009, to seeking more specific training in muscle testing. And then, obviously since I've had just a ton of different training opportunities with muscle testing, but it was truly those families that just kept on growing and kept having babies and kept having reflux and postpartum depression and whatever, scars that won't heal, inflammatory responses, migraine headaches, whatever it was. And I'm over here like, I'm getting kind of tired of telling everybody to try going gluten-free and dairy-free. Like there's got to be another way.
Yeah.
So for me, most of what happens in my life, or I wanted to say like what I can make happen, or what I, is probably just a manifestation, comes from like noticing the gap, and then kind of answering that question, like, what's the bridge? Like, what if I'm here and that's there? What's the bridge? And like, so how do I set that next board so that I
Right.
can safely get across? And though I don't think that's, been conscious for a long time, it was definitely, I'm clear that I had to chart my own course. I consciously, at 27, when I went back to finish my 4-year degree with a 4-month-old baby on my hip, was like, I need this thing to fall back on. I need this 4-year degree, right? Like, what if I had to go into the corporate, like already you
Yeah.
can hear like all of the like scarcity inside of that. Right.
Yep.
And so when I was told that I could go, kind of as going to this private women's college, like if I could go to the weekend college program, then I could be with my baby during the week, see my clients while they're sleeping, like do that. But that meant I had to drop my science degree. And that was like, wait a second, I don't think you understand. I was 10 when I knew that I was going to be a doctor, right? Like
Right.
it was, talk about faith walk, talk about trusting that fall of declaring business and communications as my major. Like I can put myself right back in my advisor's office on that like dirty brown couch, like so fast. Because I remember the sacrifice that it felt like it was, the giving up that it felt like it was.
Mm-hmm.
And it took me a couple of years to like go back to like, well, wait a second. Like I started school and then I started this little business / hobby, right? But like, okay, and then I took this course and then I took that course. I was just like, just keep doing that. That's what showed up for me. Like, just keep doing that. So it became clear to me, by I was 30, like I'm charting my own course here. Like I've got to figure out how to get to where I want to go and serve people in the way that I'm, here to serve. But I don't think the path is linear. And I actually don't think that there's like a school for that.
Yeah. What was it? I love how you said, like, it was just one, that these things happened organically, not necessarily intentionally.
Yeah.
But that there was this inside of you, this wait, no, but this is what I'm supposed to be doing. And this keeps showing up in my life. And then the ability to continue to just take steps towards that, right? I think it's so easy to get distracted or
Mm-hmm.
discouraged and
Mm-hmm.
be like, this just isn't working.
Yeah.
It's not paying the bills, or it's not, doing this, or people say this about it. But just that innate strength, drive to just know, just keep walking this path, keep going forward. I think that's so beautiful and so important for people to hear, that when you have that inside of you, there's going to be fear, there's going to be doubt, like we're human, but just if there's something from your heart, keep going that direction.
All right.
Because again, we're not our brain, we're not our thoughts.
It's a dangerous
We
place to be up here.
we're spiritual beings, and there's this love and light that pulls us to where our spirit wants to go. And if we can listen to that instead of this,
Mm-hmm.
man, it's amazing what we're able to do, and then who we're able to learn from, to be
Mm-hmm.
blessed by, to bless.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, and now, I mean, now you're teaching muscle testing to practitioners all across the US.
Mm-hmm.
And, you're meant to, that's so just awesome of where that's taken to you by listening to, no, this is the direction I need to go. This
Mm-hmm.
is this path. Just keep going, and it'll somehow,
Right.
it's gonna work.
Yeah. I, kind of one of the, because there are sometimes you run into people and they're like, how did you do that? And like, they kind of want a bullet pointed list of, which is my favorite. I was like, well, I mean, I took these courses, but I can tell you what I got out of it, but the getting it isn't from taking the course. It was from,
Right.
you're right. Like we each have to, get there on our own, but there's this visual. So I'm in an initial visit or in a report of findings, and it's my first opportunity to say to people, even when I'm teaching, it's like, here are the things to know about me. I'm very intuitive. I'm very visual. I speak kindergarten. I talk in pictures. And I have seen over the years that I think it's what helps me relate to people, or for them to, relate to me. And so when it comes to opportunities or even just possibilities that, you just get all kinds of things, right? Like, when I got your message about being on this podcast, it's when I don't just say yes to everything. Like I take this opportunity and I sit. It's like not, it could be 10 seconds. But here's what happens for me is I see a tunnel and there's white light. And some people are like, oh my gosh, that's a near death experience thing. It's like, no, for me, that's the way.
Mm-hmm.
That is the light. Like that keeps me safe and protected and in the light. And I know that I'm good to go when that's there. If that light starts to flicker, or that light has gone out, then I know that like something's going to shake down, or like, that opportunity isn't for me. And so it took me a long time to realize like the gift that is, the stopping and the listening and the
Yeah,
looking,
that's
right?
that's a huge gift.
Yeah.
And we can be, when we recognize what those gifts are and the potential they have for us then to do good,
Mm-hmm.
it's let me ask this. I'm not going to finish that thought. How have you learned to trust that? Because there's a lot of things that would say, okay, yeah, whatever,
Mm-hmm.
sure, white light, great, but what if, how have you learned to trust that?
So I would describe that as I'll like describe it in the world of like peopling, people come into your life. Like I used to spend a lot of time making myself wrong on like, well, why let's say we had like the same we had a different set of midwives for every one of our kids' births. And I would have just easily gone to and did, like who was our last midwife and not available, okay, moving on, like that. So it was just like what was available. We had the same birth doula for our first two births, but between number 2 and number 3, like life happened and there was no longer that like immediate connection, I'm clear, is still there, like one of those pick up the phone, pick up where we left off kind of thing. But life had happened and other opportunities. And I was then training a doula who had become a dear friend and had been apprenticing for nearly 6 years at that point. And that was the obvious choice for that like doula support at that time. And so I've grown to understand that people come and go. It's just phases. It doesn't mean anything, it doesn't mean anything if you consider a friendship has dissolved. Did it dissolve or did life show up? Right.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not like there are other people who are more opportunistic. It's like we've got kids and we've got businesses and we've got spouses and you're just kind of bouncing around and everybody's doing the same thing too. And you can be intentional and you can pick things back up. And those kinds of things have become how I've learned to trust is when I know that I can pick up the phone and call any one of those people and know it's going to be just like it was the last time we talked, right? Like to me, that's like analogous to seeing that white light and getting like the thumbs up, like this is good, like you're good to go here. But that's not going to last forever. That's what I
Right.
mean. Right. So like when the light
Yep.
flickers or that light goes out, it's like, like something's, fading here. It doesn't mean it's bad. It just means like next scene, like next phase.
Yep. I often share with people when I, testing things out and we're doing products, they'll say something like, well, I took that before and it didn't work. I'm like, okay, does that mean it's not going to work now?
Right.
Or if, hey, I took this 10 years ago, it was amazing, I think it'll do the same thing. Will it?
Maybe. Yeah.
Maybe it will, maybe it won't. And I think that's I liken that to what you're saying, that it's okay that we move on or we circle back, or this was in our life, this was essential, and now it's not. It's just this growth that happens. And I think we want to hold on to, maybe sometimes it is the past. We want to hold on because there was certainty there.
For sure.
There was safety in that thing. And I think that can be limiting as well, because well, no, it has to be the same way. Well, why? What is the limitation there? And I think it's really cool that you've used those experiences to know and to refine that gift and to be able to say, it's going to be okay. This is going to work. And if it flickers, okay, maybe I need to look somewhere else. But to trust that, and that trust, right? That love for self, trust for self is so critical. And yet that can be one of those things that is so elusive. And I don't want to trust myself. I need some external validation. It's like, no, maybe sometimes there's need for that, but to trust yourself and watch it manifest and watch how the gifts, the blessings, the things come. And then remember, oh yeah, that was because I trusted. That's because I listened and I followed that guidance.
Well, it's also like the resonance effect, right? Like if we're clear, like there's a resonance, right? Like if we're on, if it's a go, like there's a resonance. And so you could sort of say like that light is like, it's resonance. It's just a frequency. It's a vibration of what I'm feeling and where I'm at and in that safety and being grounded and right. Like we're all just frequency.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's so key. Let me ask this. If I break really quick from what we're doing and they can edit this, do you have like another 15 minutes or do you need to go?
I have to leave here at 22.
Okay. Could we do a part 2 and go into muscle testing?
Totally. Yeah, for sure.
Because I've loved this conversation.
Yeah, it was good.
And I do want to get into muscle testing, and I would like to have, again, it's kind of like, who do you want to talk about that with? Right? I could talk about Todd, but I just feel like, no, I want to talk with you about this.
Sure.
But I've loved the conversation we've had. So if we could do a part 2,
totally. Okay.
That would be awesome.
Yeah, I would love to.
Okay. So, so you were saying just, it's this energy and it resonates. Does it flow? Does it work with us? And I think, again, it's essential that we recognize how that works for us and what that feels like and what is that manifesting for us. and then learn to refine and trust. And there's a beauty in that, and there's a gift to that.
Yeah, so good.
And I think that if people have, as they've listened to you today, I think that maybe they can take that and say, well, what is my gift? What do I resonate with? And what are the gifts that I have that help guide me? And then just how do I trust that? I think from what you've shared, it's like you just have to trust and let things play out, because if you don't trust, you'll never see how they play out, and you'll never see like grow into that gift.
Right.
And there's trial, there's error, there's challenge, but that's where the gift is, right? Because we learn and grow, and then we see, oh my gosh, now you're testing practitioners, and you are helping teach practitioners, and who would have thought at age 10, when you're like, I'm going to be a doctor, who would have thought then that you're like, I'm going to be teaching people around the country how to do this?
Who knew?
And then having this reach that is massive, beyond just an individual, which is beautiful. And but to be able to touch so many people through what you do is amazing. And I think that's just beautiful how that's evolved and organically happened.
Yeah.
Because you've trusted.
Yeah.
So cool.
Yeah.
Well,
been great.
Thank you so much. Any final thoughts? Any final things you want to share? I mean, you shared a lot.
Yeah, I did. It's like, you never know where these conversations are going to go. Right. And also following that flow, like, where are we in resonance, and what's that next, like, not planning for what's coming next. Right. And like in conversation, if I'm just reflecting back on all the things that we've talked about, I think, if I could leave a message with people, it's like, don't wait till your 40s to start to start that unpacking and that reflecting and allowing that I've been saying a lot lately to people, like, I've never felt so self-centered, and that's going to land how it lands for some people, right? And it's going to land how it lands for others, and that I'm clear it's been in there. I'm aware of that feeling, but it scared me. So I've been running away from that for a couple of decades instead of leaning into that and utilizing that as my strength. And I just think, like, man, if I really could have trusted that and leaned on that in my 20s, raising babies, and in my early 30s, and starting businesses, and, like, gosh, so fascinating, right? Like, where that would have taken me. And my path is my path. Yep. I like, I'm where I am because it was the right time. And so that trusting oneself, trusting that voice, the intuitive pings, the voice of God, like, whatever it is you want to call it, like, listen to that, listen to it, listen deep, listen hard, right? And follow, like, your heart will exactly be in resonant with where, like, those decisions and what life is bringing at you, and you'll know the answer's right there.
Yeah. So cool. Thank you so much.
Oh my
gosh.
Appreciate
who you are. I mean, you're a beautiful human being, and you have so much to share, and I so appreciate that. And just getting to know you has been awesome. Where can people find you?
Well, Instagram seems to be like a great spot. My personal handle is Nichole Kuechle, Kuechle, and then our practice is My Healthy Beginning. Of course, myhealthybeginning.com if you're looking for our website.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, again, thank you. This is going to be part 1. Part 2 is going to be equally amazing and awesome. And just appreciate you. And please, for those of you listening, please like and share. There's so many people. I'm going to say women, men too, right? We need to hear this message of trusting, unpacking, going inward, going deep, and really finding our gifts, our talents, our strengths, and living that, because you never know who you're going to bless as you trust that voice. So thank you so much. Blessings to you.
Thank you. See ya.